Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of October 28th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this week's episode, we check in with two highly respected retail industry analysts to take the pulse of online retail and retail experience. First, a feature interview with Forrester VP and Principal Analyst Sucharita Kodali, one of the most respected analysts in the North American e-commerce space. We talk about the big trends and powerful business models that are increasingly separating the winners and the losers in online retail and beyond. Next, I talk with Andrew Cherwenka, veteran retailer, CX guru, president of Touchpoints Retail Consulting, live in the Atomic Reach podcasting studio, Retail West, in Andrew's newish home of Vancouver. Andrew takes a deep dive into Forrester's Canadian Customer Experience Index survey and goes well beyond in articulating best practices and pitfalls retailers should avoid as they continue their CX journey. Lastly, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Sucharita from Forrester.
Sucharita, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you, Michael.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. You and I have known each other for a number of years. We've worked together, and I'm so thrilled you're able to join. You've got such a great perspective on retail and e-commerce retail. Ostensibly, we were talking about jumping in and talking about the Canadian CX study and the retail component, but we'll get to that. First of all, for the listeners, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, personal journey, and what you do at Forrester?
Yeah, sure. So I am an analyst at a company called Forrester, which is a technology research company. I work with retailers specifically and the ecosystem of service providers and brands that support them. I look at changes and trends in everything from e-commerce to digital transformation to the solutions that you see in stores, like whether it's a mobile POS device or robots that could be affecting retail in the future. And I've been at Forrester for more than a decade now, and in the decade prior to Forrester, I was in retail working at a variety of different companies, big box stores, department stores, mall merchants. So that is my background.
Well, I think, and that's one of the things I enjoy the most about our conversations is you've got both the analyst eye and you've also been in the chair and had to deliver the results. So you've got the best of both worlds. So, again, ostensibly we're talking about the Canadian CX study, and there is a retail component to that. And I didn't want to get into the exact numbers of the retailer's profile, but what I wanted to talk to you about is what are you seeing in the market today where retailers are being successful? And less about which retailers perhaps, but more about what are the right things? What's the right formula? What's the secret sauce? What are retailers doing that you observe that are making them win? Because what my observation is, there's even more so than perhaps before. There's winners and there's losers, and there seems to be a bifurcation between the two. So, what have you? What's been your observations in 2019 and into 2020?
Well, I don't know that there's a single characteristic of success that is a commonality between all the companies that are winners. I think that there are different winners, whether it's an Amazon or a Walmart or a Lululemon, that are winning for very, very different reasons. What we do know at the highest level is that e-commerce is taking a lot of share in retail. It's growing faster than any other way that consumers can purchase. And the drivers of why consumers shop online are because it's convenient. It's easy to shop 24/7. They like the vast assortment and the selection that's available online, and you can often find great value online as well. Now, each of those elements, though, is very, very layered, and it means different things for different companies, and it's executed in different ways at different companies. So you take a company like Amazon, and Amazon Prime has what I would argue is the world's best loyalty program. It's this amazing combination of the advantages of a Costco plus a Netflix plus a Spotify all on the Amazon platform, and that's been a significant driver of its success. On the other hand, you can take a company like a Wayfair, and they have this enormous selection, but it's very, very deep in home, and they are really, I would say, they're unbeatable in that particular category, just in the depth of the merchandise they have and in the attributes, particularly their parametric search, to be able to find exactly what you're looking for in their vast assortment, because they're looking at the things that matter to you, like the pile length on a rug or something that's very, very specific to the item that you're purchasing.
That's one of the advantages of being so focused or dominant in a single category. You can go really deep into idiosyncratic searches like that are still meaningful to the customer and that they can still win.
Exactly.
Are you surprised in any way by the rise of the number of physical stores that are being opened by these pure play digital players? What does that tell us about consumers and how they experience, of course, even Amazon's got a number of stores. Of course, their store sales are vastly dwarfed by their online sales. But what are you thinking about these pure plays that get into physical retail?
Well, the number one reason that consumers still choose to purchase in physical stores is they want to touch and feel merchandise. And we cannot forget that the majority of retail still is happening in physical stores, and it's even more so in Canada, where consumers really, really like to go to physical stores. When you see direct-to-consumer brands opening physical stores, there are different reasons for it. If you take like a company like a ModCloth or a Warby Parker, their reason for the physical store may be more about, helping their customer acquisition costs. Customer acquisition costs are extremely high for direct-to-consumer brands, and that this is a way for them to reach more customers and extend their brand to new audiences. If you look at the stores that a company like Amazon has opened, that's probably more likely for data and to understand how consumers may shop and to really test new technologies like the computer vision technology in Amazon Go stores. So I think that there are different reasons, and a company like Amazon is in many ways in its own is a bit of an exception to how the physical store story lays out.
Let's talk about something that's connected but not certainly an exception, and that's all the numbers I see and retailers I talk to are experiencing a lot of increases in BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store. So on the one hand, it kind of delays the, I need to see it and touch it because they've already ordered it. Are you seeing that same trend, the growth of shop online and pick up in store? And what do you think is driving that kind of growth?
Yes, we are definitely seeing huge growth in BOPUS, and a lot of that is just that more retailers are offering it. One of the biggest places that you're seeing it is actually in quick service restaurants. That's really made consumers just more familiar with the approach. I mean, I think that it's one thing for a Walmart or a Target, or Canadian Tire maybe to offer something like BOPUS, but when a Starbucks does it, or some burger restaurant, it's an experience that is very easy for customers, and the frequency of those transactions and the convenience level that it adds is something that's extremely beneficial to shoppers. So that I think is some of the biggest. Those are the drivers of why consumers like it. It's just easy.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to retailers and consumers alike, and they would say exactly what you said. That's very insightful, though, that people are kind of getting trained in other parts of their lives, kind of like using an ATM gets them used to using self-checkout in a very broad sense. Retailers also tell me that their customers like the fact that that they're 100% sure that the product is going to be there when they want to head out to a store, and it's that kind of same day immediacy. Is that going to drive retailers who don't have physical stores like an Amazon to really double down on immediacy and how fast they can get it to the doorstep?
Well, we are definitely seeing the online retailers investing really heavily in that fast free delivery, and they've been doing that for years, which has put the pressure on the physical stores to actually invest in some of these omni-channel strategies to try to compete. The challenge for physical stores, especially mass merchants, is that they don't always have a great handle on their inventory, and they can't always make that promise that, this item is definitely going to be in the store at this time. They're trying, and we're seeing certainly some improvements, but it's still a little bit of a gap. The main reason consumers like buy online, pick up in store is that they are going to pass the store anyway, or they were planning on making a store trip anyway, and this helps make that visit a little bit more efficient. So that's really the benefit, and what retailers need to be investing in, which it's still very much a work in progress, Michael, is that better visibility into what is in the store, where it is in the store, and actually a great store operations to pick the item before the shopper actually, comes to retrieve the item themselves.
And then to do all that and make it efficiency and still leave a bit of money in their jeans for the sale, right? Because we know the in-store picks are pretty inefficient, right? They're particularly in grocery, because when you look I see a lot of innovation happening in e-commerce. Like you and I have been watching innovation happen in e-commerce for 20 years, but when I look for innovation today, or at least action, I'm looking at the grocery sector, because so much interesting things, for whether it's Kroger, who did the deal with Ocado, and in Canada, Sobeys did the same deal, that highly automated, highly efficient warehouse, all the way to, in the States, Target backward integrates with Shipt and does its own instead of Instacart. That's, to me, I'm seeing a lot of innovation. Anything stand out to you in that category, the grocery category?
We're seeing some robots being put into stores. Certainly the Amazon Go in the convenience store with the camera vision, digital shelf sensors, to do everything from automated price updates to being able to sense what's in stock or how many people may be walking by an aisle at any moment in time. So there's definitely different approaches. I mean, in China, Alibaba has a store where you can use an app to, they have some sensor to be able to tell how fresh or how many days left some fruit has before it expires. So there's definitely some interesting technology out there.
Last couple of questions. Are you seeing a lot of self-serve technologies being successful? I see, your standard kind of self-checkout, and there's pros and cons to that, both amongst the retail who, experience some higher theft, and then consumers are like, I got to do all this work myself. But it does seem to be taking hold in many formats. So I'm wondering if that whole self-serve element, it feels like it's being driven by, well, if I shop online, I'm used to running the process myself. Do you see that gaining, or do you see a limit on the amount? I mean, Amazon Go is a bit of there's not a lot of stores, and it's kind of way out there for a whole bunch of reasons. So, do you see a lot of retailers looking at that and putting focus on self-serve as a business model more than they used to?
Well, if I have to break it up, there's mobile self-pay or self-checkout and mobile self-service, and then there's some kind of a fixed self-service device, which would be like a kiosk. We have, in the United States at least, seen more growth in the fixed self-service component because it's just easier the kiosk has been fairly established. Consumers know how to use it. You can have multiple transactions simultaneously and only have one store associate managing all of those different solutions. The trade-off is that there is a little bit extra shrink that comes from those self-checkout devices, but the upside is that you've made it easier and reduced friction for those shoppers to shop. So that's been net good. No retailer has kind of removed their self-checkout kiosk to my knowledge. Now, on the other hand, you have the mobile self-checkout piece. that's, I think, still emerging. It's less common. The quick service restaurants with their apps probably are the closest proxy to that. The notion, though, of scanning different SKUs on your mobile device and having a running tab that then you pay before you leave, that's still relatively new. And I think that the kinks haven't completely been worked out of that solution yet. It's a great one, and it even reduces the need to have a kiosk, and you can then replace that floor space with, with more merchandise or whatever else you want to do. So it's got promise, but the technology isn't good enough to be prime time yet.
I tried one of those here in Toronto. There's a store that has that app, or that functionality, I should say, and it actually worked out really well. My observation, though, was not many people were adopting it, and I spent a half hour kind of watching people to see if they just didn't know it existed or they just weren't ready for it. And I think to me it kind of felt like a little bit of both, right? Because you had some people who are ready to do self-checkout, and this would have been a better option for them because they don't have to take the product out of the basket. But they've all got a phone in their hands. That's kind of pretty much a given. So I was trying to get my head around, do you just not know it exists, or are you just not ready for it? And I think it's somewhere in between. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably some bit of both because, even with kiosks, every consumer doesn't choose, to use the kiosk just because it exists. But there may be a moment that prompts you to use it. For instance, there could be a really long line with the cashier, but no line with the kiosk, and you just want to, kind of move on. And then that becomes the first time you've used the kiosk, and, then subsequently, you're more likely to use it again in the future. So I think that's part of it, too. That's the same reason I think that, people haven't really used Apple Pay as quickly as I think the speculation was that they would, which is that there's not a lot of friction in the current approach. And until I get that moment of friction where this is a superior means of paying, it's going to be a hard transition. Now, there are moments where a solution like Apple Pay makes a ton of sense. Like, when I do order a pizza from Papa John's, Apple Pay actually is super convenient. But that's not, the case in most transactions.
So last question for you. F is for Forrester, but F is also for forecast. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. NRF just came out in the U.S. market with a forecast of 3.8 to 4.2% growth. What are you seeing for the year ahead for 2020? Do you continue to see this momentum? There's so many variables. In some ways, not a fair question. It's like asking you if, President Trump is going to negotiate a deal with China. But, what do you see? When you look at all the data, when you talk to all the retailers you do, what are you seeing? What are they thinking for 2020?
It's really a mixed bag. There are retailers, I think Dick's Sporting Goods came out saying that, they expect a really strong holiday season. But then on the other hand, you have you have the fact that there are tariffs looming. You have more uncertainty in the economy. And we know that retail is cyclical. It just seems like the trends have been really positive for the last couple of years, and retail never has trends that last positively for this long. So it's a little too early to tell, but I tend to be often a contrarian, and when everyone else is super positive, I think that it may be that we're missing some of the storm clouds that could be coming.
Well, I want to check in with you. We'll be together in the same city in January at the NRF Big Show, so maybe we can check in and see how your perspective suits after the holiday season in the States. So thanks so much, Sucharita, for joining me today. Always a treat to catch up and talk with you. Thanks for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you, Michael.
Andrew, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. We're here at Retail West, Retail Council of Canada's conference this time in the Atomic Reach podcasting studio. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Good to see you again.
Well, it's great to have you back on. I think it's been several months now, and the opportunity is to chat about the Forrester CX study. I interviewed Rick Parrish from Forrester, and we just finished talking to Sucharita as well from Forrester, who kind of delved into CX and retail specifically and what makes retailers successful or less successful. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't think of anyone better to talk through this report at that retail level with your background. And I wanted to spend less time in our conversation on the nuts and bolts of the report, because that's a point in time, and more tap into your expertise about understanding CX, how to structure it, how to measure it, and those things. So kind of a long introduction.
Yeah.
But for those who may not remember or may not have listened to your episode, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what you do here in the great city of Vancouver.
Yeah, I've been in Vancouver for 1 year now. I'm a retail strategist focusing mostly on eCommerce and customer experience. And my last full-time position was at Walmart, where I was one of 3 VPs running Walmart.ca. I ran customer experience and strategy for Walmart.ca.
So again, Rick Parrish put out, and Forrester put out a CX study, and it has a methodology. Let's go through that through your lens. And then you actually did some analysis on their analysis, which I want to hear about how different categories perform differently, and then different categories within retail perform differently.
Yeah.
So walk us through your impressions through your lens of the study itself, a bit about their methodology. Everybody uses different methodology. And then what your observations were about their results and what it tells us about customer experience today.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just thankful when studies like this come out. I love that customer experience is a discipline now. I love the art and the science of understanding what customers need and delivering it to them. And this study is quite interesting. It goes across all industries, and it measures CX quality and CX loyalty.
And for the listeners, I kind of jumped over this in case I hadn't listened to the episode, but it's all Canadian data, and it covers off multiple industries, including retail, but not exclusively retail.
Right, yeah, and that's what I found particularly interesting is assessing the customer experience for airlines, for investment banks, for commercial banks, for retail, splitting into apparel. It's really interesting to be able to carve that out. And the study does a great job of presenting the data. You're right, I took it one step further to look at what trends I could see and then start to hypothesize on why some industries are outperforming others.
So what did you find? First of all, why don't you take us quickly through their methodology, they being Forrester's, and then take us through some of their results and your observations.
Yeah, Forrester, I don't know what the number is. Thousands of Canadians were asked.
Just from my memory, I think it was about 5,000.
5,000.
So it's a good sample size.
Statistically significant, and they were asked about CX quality, which means effectiveness, ease, and emotion, and customer loyalty. And the way Forrester defined that is retention, enrichment, and advocacy.
Would you shop again? Would you shop with me again?
Yep.
Would you tell your friends, basically, that kind of advocacy means, right?
Yeah, exactly. So on the quality side, it's can you do what you came here to do? And does it feel good to do it? And that's the quality side. And loyalty is, the golden benchmark, the main metric for every retailer today has to be customer lifetime value. And Forrester is trying to get to the heart of CLTV by asking Canadians, how do you feel about your shopping experience with this retailer?
Would you come back? And because what I liked about their methodology is sometimes you kind of get a bit stuck on the willingness to recommend. And I like willingness to recommend, but it has its pros and cons. And one of the cons is it's not really instructive as to future performance, right?
Right.
You may, I'm willing to recommend, but I'm not going to shop there again.
Yeah.
I liked it. Yeah. I'm not going to loyal, but it was a fine experience. I'll tell somebody about it, plus minus or something else. So I did like, and the customer value is such an important metric.
Yeah. I liked their thinking. And they interviewed people across all different industries. And this is where I think the study falls down. I mean, it certainly gets a CX score across all industries, but my question would be, is it really fair to ask the same series of questions to someone who's buying an airline ticket as to someone who's researching a luxury automobile? Is it really the same experience? I mean, I would want to have hyper-specific questions if I'm talking to someone that is booking a flight, and I'd want those to be different than how were you feeling? Were you emotionally driven by the photos of the car that you're considering buying in 20 years? They're two very different experiences. So it's not particularly fair to say airlines underperformed compared to auto luxury manufacturers. It's a fact based on this study, but I don't know if that means that airlines are doing poorly, or if it just means that our expectations around the questions that were asked are higher for airlines. I want my ticket, I want to get to where I want to go, and sometimes it's really challenging based on different websites.
You know, it's interesting because at the one hand, we're all consumers and we all consume across a bunch of different things. So I can see the rationale and the fairness behind that. I bought an airline ticket, I haven't bought a high-performance car this week anyway. Yeah. But I can see where they're coming from. But what did you learn when you kind of got into looking at the different categories from their study?
Yeah, I'll start at the highest level. I learned that the industries that performed the best were auto luxury, auto mass, and financial services. So banks, investment firms, credit card issuers. They performed best on average. And they also had the lowest standard deviation. They had the scores that were more or less the same across all of competitors. And my theory on that is, well, it's because we don't expect a whole lot in the transaction side of things. We expect to get really good information. I'm there to research a luxury automobile. But you know what? I'm not going to spend $200,000 on a car online. I mean, Tesla feels otherwise, but for the most part, I'm buying my luxury automobile at a dealership, and I'm going online to research it. On the other end of the spectrum, the worst performers were the airlines and rental cars and apparel retailers. And a big part of that, I feel, is because people are going online to achieve a purchase objective. They want to check out. And there are more steps involved instead of just research. And as you include more steps, the complexity is increased. So not only did they perform the worst among all industries, but their deviation was the highest. Some, like Marks, did really well, and other retailers did very poorly. And it's that kind of deviation that's really interesting to me. It means that's the biggest opportunity from a CX perspective.
That's interesting. And when you think about Marks, of course, the great business, we know our good friend David Louis runs the market. He's done a wonderful job on Marks. I mean, it's interesting as the brand owners kind of look at these studies, right? They think, what's behind that number? Great. I'm at the top of the game in the class. Wonder what's behind that number. Obviously, a lot of hard work goes into it, but everybody's working hard. What's the difference in organizations? And this is where I want to transcend a little bit beyond the study. You've got a few more things to say in kind of two directions. One is your advice to retailers in any category, but including apparel, you know, how to perform better in terms of CX. And then, importantly, Forrester's one methodology, but what's your advice to retailers? How do you measure that kind of, you know, what are those things and how do you measure CX? And of course, the latter conversation is then what do you do about it? But let's stick to the first two first.
So, I mean, my first piece of advice would be to invest in customer experience. And that could mean hiring a VP of CX. Or, and I asked David Louis this direct question. I said, why do you think Marks did so well in this study? And if you look at the performance, I put Marks into as an apparel retailer. I know they sell other things as well, but compared to Nordstrom and Old Navy and Marshalls and The Gap and HBC, Marks was number one. And so his first thought, he was really happy, as he should be, because they invested heavily in it. He owns customer experience, and he is the VP marketing. So my first piece of advice, and I saw this, by the way, consistently, the top performers either had a VP of CX or the person that owned customer experience was the marketer, the chief marketing officer or the VP marketing.
Is there risk when you deem someone, and this is kind of a loaded question because you've done the role, is there a risk when you anoint someone a senior role in CX that the rest of the organization goes, well, I don't have to worry about it because, you know, he or she's the head of CX, so that's their problem. Is there a risk in that?
Not if it comes from the very top. Not if the CEO believes in customer experience. And it's not just checking a box to say, do we have the customer represented? Yes, we have one person, so we're good. That is not the way to do it.
Right.
The retailers, like Mark's, that are doing really well, understand that it is all about the customer. That's
and about the brand and all those connections, right?
Yeah, and an understanding of who is our customer, what do they want, how do we deliver it to them. And that sounds like something that we've been talking about for decades, and we have, but now there's an art and science around it. We can measure much, much more, which gets into that second part of your question.
Right, that's a great segue. How do retailers think about measuring this? If there's so many competing methodologies. Earlier we were talking about willingness to recommend as one proxy.
Yeah.
But what's your recommendation? How do they?
I like NPS scores. I think they're good. They're a good guiding metric. I would say that the answer is ask the questions that are specific to you and to your brand. So Sage Wellness is going to have very different questions than MEC will. And MEC, by the way, MEC is doing extremely well. They have a great customer satisfaction or customer experience score.
In the Forrester report.
Forrester report. Sage wasn't measured in this one, but Sage versus MEC versus Sport Check versus Shoppers Drug Mart, all very different questions. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock.
There must be a foundation of a process or foundation of principles.
Yes.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
That everyone should be based on.
Yep.
And then, depending on who they are, what they sell, and how they go to market, right?
Yeah, for sure. There are, and if we're just talking about surveys, there are some standard questions that everybody should be asking. Could you find what you're looking for? Was it easy to check out? There are some standard questions. I would not rely just on survey data, and I don't know many successful companies that are, but I would absolutely tie in your purchase metrics.
So that's that kind of understanding the success of the transactional, let's call them transactional metrics, right?
Yeah.
Were you able to do what you came to do?
Yep. I would match what the customers are saying with your Google Analytics data, which is showing us how they behave. I'd match that with the purchase data. Ideally tie in your point of sale, your loyalty data, tie everything in together to get a true 360-degree view of the customer, really understand who they are and what they want, and then deliver it to them. And then check all the way along, are we meeting your needs?
But don't rely on survey data.
I think survey data is a really important feed to understand who the customer is, but it's qualitative, and it is what people say they want. It is not necessarily what they actually want. So
what do you think of these surveys that we all do? I've done them, that are at the end of the transaction on the register tape. They perform an operational metric. How's that store doing, of course? So there's a whole bunch of metrics that are internal, but is that useful for understanding customer experience?
Yes. My fast answer is yes. I think that so many of these things, I consider them weather vanes. I think it points us in the right direction. It's not going to give us an actual metric. It's not going to help us.
It almost points. It's funny because it almost points us to problems more than solutions, right? When you look across the stores or across, a day-to-day feed of satisfaction metrics from your website, there's a problem. It may not point to success overall.
Yeah, I mean, if the scores go up, I would want to know why. And I would certainly want to be able to highlight if the scores are going down. I get a ton of different kinds of surveys from all my e-commerce experiences. I'm on every single retailer's website, and I'm actually purchasing and returning to get the full CX journey. And some retailers are asking me, there's one retailer that asked me 48 questions in a survey afterwards.
Come on.
And I do not understand what kind of quality data you're going to get from someone who...
A 48th question.
And you cannot submit until you've answered all 48 questions. There are others. There's a company out here, Article.com, that's doing really well. And they only asked me, I think, 3 or 4 questions in a really nicely designed, super easy to complete. And that took me maybe a minute to do.
So that was a post-transactional
post-transaction.
email.
After I bought a side table from them, it was a really nicely designed, how was your purchase? Would you recommend it? Just 4 of the most basic questions.
Now, did they do a follow-on survey? Because there's the 2 points of truth.
Right.
For the brand, right? How the checkout experience, so to speak, and then the delivery, I got the product, unpackaging experience. Did they send a follow-on survey?
I don't remember if I got 2 from them. I'm not sure.
That's one of that BizRate classic remember BizRate, right? They did that classic. I used that at the shopping channel. It was very good because I thought, tell me how the transaction experience was, but then tell me a little bit more of the full experience because I got the product, it opened up, met expectations.
Yeah.
I always thought it would be great to do. And for those who returned it, tell me about why you returned it. You're always trying to capture that too.
Yeah,
so Article's doing a good job.
I think Article, as far as the surveys, I think they're doing a great job in so many respects. But specifically, I really liked the experience throughout, and the survey afterwards was nicely designed, and it was very fast.
And from your perspective, they can but they can learn something from that survey, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be 48 questions.
Exactly, and I think people of all demographics and walks of life and pressures for time would fill out 4 questions, but would not necessarily fill out 48 questions.
Well, then you get quality versus quantity.
Exactly.
Right? I'm going to take my time.
Yeah, how many people have enough time to answer 48 questions?
But
and if
tempting.
they do, does that mean they're really angry?
But you've worked for big companies. It's tempting, right? It's tempting to... Every department wants to know a little bit about the
exactly what
customer,
happened in this case. Yeah, that's exactly it. Everybody was saying, don't take my question out. Yeah, there are 48 departments that all have one question.
A little bit of scope creep there.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think in order to truly build your CX program to continuously improve on the customer's expectations, you need to continue to survey and ask your customers. You need to build out that ongoing journey map. You need to match it with actual purchase and behavioral data. And it all has to be building continually. We're right now at the Retail West show in Vancouver, and the theme I'm getting from people up on stage is it is all about the data, but making the data usable and pulling in all those different sources to build out a profile of who the customer is and what they're doing and what they want to receive. The golden state that we're all pursuing is this personalized one-to-one marketing. Yeah. And I think we're getting closer. We're still nowhere near the full potential, not even close. We're taking baby steps toward one-to-one marketing, but this all helps. An understanding of customer experience and the art and science around it helps us build out that profile and gets us closer to it.
Well, thanks for sharing your insights. It's great, always great to chit and chat with you. I learn so much every time we talk. If people want to get a hold of you, want to learn more, want to chat with you directly, how do they get a hold of you?
But they can find me on LinkedIn. My last name is Cherwenka, Cherwenka.
All right, well, very good. Well, thanks again for joining us here on the Voice of Retail, and it's great to see you again.
It's great. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks to Sucharita and Andrew for being my guests on this episode. Now let's hit the highlights in Retail This Week e-newsletter. I put this newsletter together each and every week, biggest circulation of any weekly in Canada, and you can subscribe on retailcouncil.org for free. So what's in the news today? Well, headline I started up with is from Grocery Business. Sobeys is actually taking, this is really interesting, taking recycled plastic bags and making it into furniture, public furniture like benches, park benches and things like that in community-oriented or family-oriented community spaces across Atlantic Canada, where, of course, Empire Food is based. So that's exciting. That's an interesting use of bags as everyone looks to the next generation of what all that looks like. Levi's sees success in Canadian concept store. This from Retail Insider. Levi's a big soft spot for me as I worked for Levi's Strauss, and it's great to see them back in the news in terms of innovating in their store design. A couple of interesting videos. We've got Untuck CEO Aaron Sandez on expanding direct-to-consumer sales. So interesting factor. I think we've talked about it before on this podcast is the Sherway location of Untuckit is actually one of the most productive in all of North America. So one of those formats that traveled well. Dozens of charges laid in massive Ottawa shoplifting ring. So if you were watching the news, paying attention to the news earlier in the year, there's a lot of crime going on in LCBOs, the liquor store in Ontario, Shoppers Drug Marts, people just walking in, grabbing things, and just leaving without paying. And looks like there is a significant arrest. Congratulations to Ottawa Police for putting a stop to that, or at least putting a dent into it. From CTV, Not Your Mother's Ginger Ale cannabis-infused drinks to hit the shelves in December. So we've talked about Cannabis 2.0 and how that, even though they've been legal technically now for a while, they're in production. So this was the folks at Canopy showing off a product that looks like ginger ale with a bit of cannabis in it. So pretty exciting. And exciting in the categories. We think that will help to continue to destigmatize the product for sure. That from CTV. HBC CEO trying to win Canadians back to Hudson's Bay. So interesting article here from Fortune. Helena Folks talking about, as it says, banking on Canadians' attachment to Hudson's Bay to keep it going. As they continue to consolidate down, HBC or Hudson's Bay, the Bay or Hudson's Bay as it's known, becomes a pretty significant component. Now, late breaking news, it's Thursday night. Late breaking news that the privatization has run into a snag, as reported on the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail is talking about that Catalyst has enough votes to block the privatization. So this is late breaking news, and it'll sort its way out. So it's been a long journey for Hudson's Bay, Richard Baker and Hudson's Bay in terms of taking it private. It looked like they had gotten that one over the finish line, but now Catalyst Group is saying no. So we'll keep an eye on that as that story develops over the next, could be weeks and months even. Speaking of interesting deals, so to speak, LMVH, which is a luxury brand, owns a number of things, including Sephora is making a bid for Tiffany Jewelry, Tiffany and Company. $14.5 billion bid for Tiffany and Company. It seems a little thin, actually, based on Tiffany, based on that brand. We'll see where that all lies out. But I think as a portfolio strategy, it certainly sees and fits well. LMVH has done a very good job of stitching together luxury portfolios. So I think there certainly has some merit for it, as opposed to just kind of an orphan in a group where there's no strategic advantages or strength in managing such a luxury brand. So we'll see how that develops. That from Fortune. From CBC, developers wage West Edmonton Mall in troubled U.S. mega project. I don't know if troubled is the right description for American Dream. Certainly it's gone through a lot of ups and downs. I guess you could call it trouble. It's been in and out of bankruptcy, but looks like it's finally going to launch. This is this giant American Dream of that's what it's called in New Jersey. Interestingly, the comedians are behind it. Edmonton's Mall building billionaire family is described in CBC. So they put up 49% of its interest in West Edmonton Mall and 49% of its interest in the Mall of America in Minnesota to finance the development. So talking about making big bets, good luck to those bold entrepreneurs. Speaking of entrepreneurs, Birchbox CEO looking beyond beauty connoisseurs for its next phase of growth from CNBC. Love the Birchbox idea. Probably one of those first, not quite the first, but certainly did a really good job of that monthly subscription service. But now I think they got lapped a little bit. Even though they have 1 million customers, 500 brand partnerships, they're looking for growth and looking to broaden its reach and take the business to its next natural step. From Canadian grocer, Amazon drops the monthly fee to boost grocery delivery sales. So Amazon, competing in fresh and frozen, particularly in the U.S. or solely, I guess, in the U.S., has an offering where if you're a Prime member, you can pay an extra $15 for its Amazon Fresh service to Laws, which delivers meat and vegetables and other groceries. So now, so that's $15 on top of the $119 subscription fee. And of course, we know how successful Prime has been. There's like 105 million subscribers or Prime members in the U.S., and now they're dropping the $15 surcharge. So that's super interesting. That's a big bet. I was reading Sucharita actually was in the news. I was just skinning through various social media, and they were talking about how much Amazon spends on delivery is basically more than the GDP of 100 countries. So there's no question this whole play, talk about big bets for delivery, is certainly expensive. Allbirds says the Allbirds CEO talks about the company opening 20 stores next year. In and of itself, that's not all that interesting. But what is interesting is how this digital-first wool sneaker Silicon Valley startup is really spending a lot of its money on physical stores. So just continues to highlight the importance of physical stores. And from a whole number of different things, I've been to their store in New York City. It's quite nice, actually, right across from the Amazon 4-star store in Soho. News for independent retailers. Great article here from Toronto Life. Confessions of a legal pot dealer. So it's a great in-depth article for one of the winners for the lottery. The article is just a well-written, interesting read. And it's kind of a first person. Against the odds, I won. But before I could open my shop, I had to deal with millionaire vultures, hostile landlords, $25,000 in fine, product shortages, and multiple death threats. So check that out. It's really an interesting read. And by the way, I'll be covering the Canadian Cannabis Awards coming up next week, sponsored by Environics Analytics. Will be sponsoring me as I cover that award show, Lift & Co.'s award show, a big gala coming up in Toronto next Friday. And then on November 19th, Retail Council of Canada is hosting their Retail Cannabis Forum. I'll be on the main stage, and that, again, I'll be podcasting from there and in the Environics Analytics podcasting studio. So look forward to lots more content in and around retail cannabis and CBD. I'm starting to do more interviews in and around CBD, mostly with, but not exclusively with, some friends from the United States, because they have a bit of a clearer demarcation line there. But more on that to follow. And speaking of cannabis, news from Saskatchewan that they're going to start removing their cap on stores. Saskatchewan's actually a pretty forward-thinking market. They are actually a market that allows home delivery, for example. Pineapple Express is operating in Saskatchewan. We talked to the great Chiaro, who has a couple of stores there, and described that environment. And I guess if there's any concern, it's that the entrepreneurs are worried about a free-for-all that could snuff out independent pot shops. So we'll see how that works out. I think it'll be a close one to watch, and we wish everyone the best of luck in that. South Caribou Business wins a National Innovation Award. So Perlator looks like they sponsored a National Innovation Award with a $100,000 benefit, and this from the South Caribou 100-mile free press. Congratulations to entrepreneur who won that award. What else? The great John Graham from Winnipeg talking here, featured about there's a tough time in Winnipeg. Theft rates are surging. This is not a new phenomenon, not new as in last week. It's been going on for 12, 18 months, if not longer. So John is out there helping us all try to figure that out and helping retailers figure that out as well. Spotlight in digital media, a couple of interesting articles, not the least of which is this forecast that Amazon could surpass Walmart as the biggest company. They look like they could generate $300 billion in revenue next year. That could make it the second largest U.S. company by revenue after Walmart. I think off the top, Walmart's closer to 500, but they're clearly on a trajectory. But at what cost is really the key question as they continue to drop limits in terms of what they'll ship and then drop fees. It is continuing to be a big bet that will drive the flywheel and create revenue when they want it. Former Stitch Fix CEO, I'm a big fan of Stitch Fix actually. It's a great subscription service. AI and machine learning already dominate, but e-commerce is still open. What did they say? Still open for a player to have a meaningful impact. So interesting there, that from TechCrunch. Bulk Barn, our Canada's own Bulk Barn, expands Instacart partnership. So Jason Oldfield is talking here in Canadian Grocery about how they're using Instacart after a pilot to expand home delivery for Bulk Barn. So congratulations to them, and we wish them, of course, all the best of luck as they continue to work on that. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcasting platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.